welcome to Butterfly Stories.
Episode 2.
By us, Stephen.
And Kelly.
At Elliot Wellbeing. This is unique, this episode for me. I've never sat in this chair. I've always been the podcast host for things I've done before, but I've never spoke about myself, so...
Well, this is a rarity as well for you to have 1 hour for you to be able to speak without me interrupting, so enjoy it.
That's the only reason I wanted to get married, so time to say a speech, 20 minutes uninterrupted. It was fantastic. It was amazing that time.
I don't even know if it was uninterrupted.
No, it wasn't. I think you were heckling me at the time. So obviously, like the last episode we sat and we told your story, which was inspiring and powerful. For me, my story, like I'm going to come to present day and where we're sitting right now. We've got producer Craig sitting there. You see, having a producer. We've made it in life. We've absolutely made it in life.
Came full circle as well, because this is how we started off.
Oh, absolutely. It's a good point. So the podcast I was doing at the time with my friend Chris, you'd seen me on that.
Yeah.
That podcast and said, I like what I see.
No, you just came across so well and just such a nice person. I just loved how you spoke, and I loved how you spoke about your kids, and I just thought you seemed so lovely and kind.
I talk about my kids a lot. So my 2 daughters, they redefined who I was as a person, and obviously now I've got an amazing stepson and our beautiful wee baby together. My kids completely changed who I am as a person and totally changed my perspective on life, taking it away from me. I never realised it was on me for a long time. My focus and how selfish, not in a kind of arrogant way, but really selfish I was at times in my behaviours.
I think we can all be like that at one point in our life.
Yeah. And I suppose to tell my story, where do I start with that? Way back at the start when I was young, a teenager. For me, I've always had a desire, not always, but from a teenage age to help people. And that comes from a place of suffering myself. I remember the age of 14, 15, having bulimia. That was my first exposure to my own mental health issues and trying to come to terms with exactly what is this and why am I doing this. I remember everything associated with that as well, the shame. I remember being out in my mum and dad's back garden and vomiting, trying to hide away from them, and my dad coming out and catching me doing that. My dad's my hero, and I'll talk about my dad later on. He's actually the pivotal point in me changing, and the reason I'm sitting here today is him. But he didn't understand, that generation. It's not a bad thing that they didn't understand. It's just they approached, raising us as parents with the knowledge they had and did the best job they could.
I still don't know if it is completely understood, something like an eating disorder just now as well. People think it's about the food and it's nothing to do with that, or it's about body image, and that can be part of it, but it's just still a small part.
Yeah, it's obviously something I've explored myself over the years as to why I was doing that, and I've come up with many answers for that, and I still don't fully understand my reasoning behind it. A lot of it's control. You perhaps get bullied when I was at school and things like that. Perhaps it was my way of gaining control back of who I am as a person. There's that thing where you eat a lot of food and the satisfaction with that. You feel satisfied and the blood rushing to your tummy, and there's that sense of satisfaction there. So maybe it was around that. I don't fully know, but there's a few different strands to pull on there, I suppose. Going on from there, again, that desire to help people, and I suppose I've always been a compassionate person. I remember my first exposure to death. This is a dead cheery episode, this isn't it? Was my gran when I was 19, and my mum leaning heavily on me at that point in my life. She explained to me about my gran had cancer, and she came to me and said, your gran's, she's got nodules on her stomach. I didn't know what nodules were. I was 19. I loved wrestling, so if it's something to do with Hulk Hogan, I could explain what it was. But nodules in her stomach, I didn't know what that was.
I still don't.
I don't know. So it was to do with the cancer that they'd found in the stomach, and literally within a couple of weeks, my gran had passed away because it was really late on they'd caught it. And I just had a light bulb moment there. Something's come on. That's a therapy session for me. This is brilliant. So I just actually thought of something.
Do you want to lie in that couch?
I just actually thought of something I carried with me for years round about my gran. And I've actually said to you before about this, that I had no exposure to death before other than my dog passing away, which is a big thing as well. But like a loved one that close, my gran was like a second mum to me, and I was scared. She was in hospital, and my mum had woke me up and said, "It's time, Stephen, your gran's not got long left." And I just lay in bed, and she was leaving with my dad to go to the hospital, and my elder brother Kevin was in the house at the time. He was still sleeping. My mum hadn't said to him. And again, I think that again is reflective of who I was to my mum, that source of compassion and empathy in the shoulder that she came to me to break that news to. And I lay in my bed for an hour, just paralysed with fear, thinking, I don't know what to do here. Don't have a clue what to do. Eventually I got up and woke my brother up and said, we need to go to the hospital. Gran's not got long left. And we got there and we missed her last words by minutes, and it was, "Where's my boys?" And I held that with me for years, that guilt of this amazing woman that had been there for me all those years, again, like a second mum to me. And the time that she needed me the most, I wasn't there for her when she was asking for us. And not only that, I was responsible for my brother not being there as well. So something I carried with me for years, and as I've evolved through life and my the way that I think about life and spirituality and things like that, you become more at ease and comfort with that, knowing that in my view, this isn't it. And that is, funnily enough, when my gran, not funnily enough, there's nothing funny about this story. When my gran passed away, that was my first realisation, is this isn't it. Like this, we're all spiritual beings living a human life. In my view, I looked in her eyes when she'd passed away and I thought, she's not there anymore. Her essence is gone. I don't know where it's gone, but it's gone somewhere else. And that to me is like my first knowing without a doubt that there's something else. Definitely.
And remember that book that we read, Dying to Be Me, the Anita Murjani, is it? Mm-hmm. And she had the near-death experience, and she spoke about all the things that she's seen, and she couldn't have known, like the doctors having conversations about her in another room. That I think that brought me a bit of comfort, because I used to fear death. But I think both of us probably had that, like at younger ages, and we didn't deal with it at the right time, and that's something that you carry with you for years. And the other thing that popped out to me was you saying that you had that guilt, and when you think about the scale of consciousness, the David Hawkins one, right down at the bottom, the low energy stuff is guilt and shame. So like, it doesn't matter where it comes from, even though you didn't have bad intentions, you still had that feeling. And it's the feelings and the emotions around it that count. So you can see how that would have dragged you down. Yeah, and I didn't realise how much it dragged me down, and the impact it had, going through my 20s. I was I didn't drink at all until I was 21. I was a good, clean living boy. Can you imagine we had met at that age? No, I know. Totally different.
When you friend requested me on Facebook those years ago, and I'd looked, and I think your profile picture was at your son's christening? Communion. I don't know all the Catholic terms. And I thought, a good Christian girl, she'll be good, clean, fun. No, I was wrong. And I mean that in the best possible way. It was so much fun. Perhaps I thought you were going to be a little bit boring. I don't know. I'm not trying to create a picture of Catholics. See, let's not turn into that kind of podcast. It's not that kind of podcast.
My mum will watch us.
I know. I love Catholics, Kathy. So, yeah, where was I with that? Sorry, that's knocked me off track. Oh, yeah, so up until I was 21, I didn't drink at all. And I don't know whether it was, you know, the fallout, because I carried that for a couple of years. Well, I've carried it for more than a couple of years. The bulimia, that followed me right through into my mid-30s. I remember actually, like, my first ever girlfriend, like, her parents asking questions, because I'd go up even when I was there just and make myself purge and stuff like that, and I'd come back down. You'd have a sniffly nose and things like that. They thought I was taking drugs. They thought I was away sniffing lines and stuff like that, but it wasn't that at all.
Couldn't be any further from the truth.
Wasn't further from the truth. I had I think when I reached 21, I was at uni then. I had my first job since I was 16. Over in Tesco pushing trolleys. By the way, that was an amazing job. I met some great friends doing that. But I had real self-identity issues then and who I actually was as a person. I was trying to fit in desperately, I think, because I'd been this person before, good, clean, living boy, and I just went completely off the rails when I was 21. For me, it was drink that I turned to, and I suppose it was a classic kind of Scottish binge drinking lifestyle I was living at that point in time. At heart, I was still a good person, but I was probably a bit of an arsehole as well. And just in terms of my lack of consideration for other people, I was so caught up in myself and who I was as a person at that point in life.
It's easy to do though. The ego takes over, and like what you're saying about your identity, that's just so normal for teenagers because they're going through this transition from being a child to an adult. And if they don't get the right guidance or role models, like I was saying, somebody stepped in for me. But if you don't get that and realise that this is normal, what you're going through, you can start to take it inwards and you go through this egocentric part of your life. And if you don't come out the other side, it can carry on. Sometimes some people never get out of that area.
Yeah. For me then, as I went through into my mid-20s, that continued, and probably at the age 24, 25, that's when I was at my lowest in terms of how I felt about myself. Again, question who I was, get into a relationship that just wasn't right for me. It's not a criticism on anybody at all. It wasn't right for both of us, because I think you're at that vibrational level, you attract what you are and how you're being as you attract that into your life, and that's what I attracted into my life. However, the one positive coming from that, well, there was a few positives coming from that, but that was my first exposure to a life coach back in 2006. I met Lawrence Clifford, who is one of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life.
Yes.
I get emotional talking about Lawrence. I don't say this lightly at all. I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for Lawrence. I wouldn't be. There's life coaches, and then there's like guardian angels, and I know that sounds cliched, but there's times in my life where I've really hit rock bottom, and he's just said, come to me and just let's walk, let's go talk, I'm there for you. He's went above and beyond every time I've needed him. He's such an amazing person. And that was my first exposure to that type of thing, like a life coach. And it was my mum that a relative had been to see Lawrence and heard about him. And before that, I tried counselling, I tried medication, a few different counsellors I've tried, trying to, again, get to the bottom of why did I feel so low? Why did this bulimia persist? And again, just who was I as a person? Why did I feel like this? And none of it worked for me. I'm not saying that doesn't work for anybody, that just didn't work for me. And to me, it was a life coach. That was my route forward, because he did give me that. He gave me a route forward. It was almost, Lawrence was of the view, like, we did talk about some of the stuff like that brought pain, but he was more about how do we find a route forward? What's your action plan to move forward? Who do you want to be? Who are you? And he allowed me to tap into who I really was at my core as a person. And round about that time, I became a DJ as well. So I think 2006 I became a DJ just before I started seeing Lawrence. The guy who I had as my mentor was a guy called Bobby Coates. Bobby's still out there setting up 6 discos a weekend. I don't know how he does that. I can't be bothered setting up 1 disco, never mind 6. But Bobby took me under his wing. Bobby was actually my craft design teacher at high school. Sounds a bit creepy when you say it like that, but it wasn't creepy at all. I know what you say. I did hospital radio first. I was actually, when I was working at Tesco out pushing trolleys, they were there collecting for the radio station, which was Radio Heartbeat over in the Monklands, which is a really inappropriate name for a hospital radio, Radio Heartbeat. So they were there collecting. I actually went into the radio station and started doing that. I remember the first track I played, which was my grand's favourite song, funnily enough, Wichita Lineman by Glenn Campbell. Country's had a massive You Look Lost right now.
Never, can I think?
It's a great song. It takes me way back to sitting in that studio playing that song. Country's had a massive comeback, but that's old school country, Glenn Campbell. And Bobby worked at the radio station as well. And a few years later, again, that was probably about 16, 17, I was doing the hospital radio, 2006. Bobby said, do you fancy coming out and doing being a mobile DJ? And I remember going out, first ever gig I did. And for a guy with quite a bad memory, I remember it like crystal clear. It was Holy Family Primary School Hall. It was a 40th birthday party. And I just remember that feeling of just like watching people dance and just let all those inhibitions go, and that feeling of euphoria going home that night. Bobby, because he had quite a lot of agency work, he had some really high profile gigs, like he'd get a lot of gigs in the big Hilton in Glasgow and stuff like that. I remember him handing me a microphone, probably 3rd gig in, and just said, right, you're in charge tonight. I hadn't used a microphone by that point. People don't believe me when I say this, but I was painfully shy at times. I know some people find it hard to believe, but at times I was painfully shy. So to do that, the arse just fell out my trousers doing that type of thing. But it helped push me on as an entertainer, being exposed to DJing in front of 400 people, 3-4 gigs in. Funnily enough now, like 400, 500 people's no bother. It's when you go down to those small gigs, like when we came out of COVID, like you had 20 people you were DJing to. The margin of error there's far smaller. You need to get that absolutely spot on, everything you're doing. When you playing to 400, 500 people, if you can't fill a dance floor, then you probably need to go home and not do that again. So, and the two of them married together so well, meeting Lawrence and DJing, that was a big change in my life, where I felt alive when I went out and DJed. And Lawrence came up with my mantra for life, which I still carry through. It's every day's a disco. And I love that. And that doesn't mean to say that I'm kicking about doing the cha-cha slide every single day. It's not. I'd probably get arrested if I kicked about like DJ mode all the time. But I'd said this thing to Lawrence is, I get to go out and be somebody else for 4 or 5 hours, and it's amazing. I put this mask on and I'm somebody else. He says, no, you're not. You're not somebody else. He says, because if you were somebody else, people would see through that. You wouldn't be authentic and you wouldn't be successful. I'm so fortunate that I've been very successful in my DJ career. In a time before we had to think about what Facebook ads were and push things out in terms of marketing, it's all word of mouth, and I'm so grateful that I've done that. And that was Lawrence's point. It says, you've built this based on authenticity. That's you. And again, it came down to that desire to put smiles on people's faces. Mm-hmm. And if I track that away back, that started, I mentioned earlier on, I get bullied a bit when I was at school. I dealt with that through humour, through comedy. I get myself out of so many fights by using humour.
Mm-hmm.
I still... Me? No, that doesn't work. I still look back and some of the things I was saying then, I said to some of these bullies, I don't know how I get away with it.
Probably just shocked them, like disarmed them.
Aye, I think so. And that's been a continuous thing throughout my life is comedy, humour. I absolutely love comedy. I love humour. I love laughing. The older I get, the dafter things I laugh at.
That's what won me.
I just laugh at so many stupid things, and my Facebook feed is just a constant procession of dad jokes.
You're definitely well known for your dad jokes.
I know, people
now,
just tag
people
me.
Send them all the time and like, that's a Stephen joke.
I know. And I'm not ashamed of that. That's fine. So again, that's where Lauren's come up with that, every day's a disco, and the meaning behind that mantra is, how do you bring that energy to every single day of your life? That enthusiasm and passion for life. And that definitely changed things for me. Another really powerful thing that Lawrence had said to me, so at that point, 2007, had my first daughter, is people are paying me money to go out there and entertain them, but does that match the person that's sitting in the house? Mm-hmm. Am I bringing that same level of energy to that beautiful human being that is completely dependent on me, on my just this miserable, grumpy old bugger? Mm-hmm. Wasn't old at that point, but you get what I mean. So that shifted my perspective, and he introduced me to people like Wayne Dyer, Tony Robbins, the Esther and Jerry Hicks with the law of attraction. Is Abram, the teachers of Abraham Hicks. I remember Lawrence gave me this stack of kind of self-help tapes to go and convert for him put them on CDs for him at the time. Our kids don't even know what CDs are. That shows how long ago it was. And I sat and converted all of these, but whilst I was converting them, the way you converted at the time, you had to listen to it. Well, you could go to a different room if you wanted, but I was listening to this stuff. And the law of attraction stuff, Abraham, and I just thought, this is wild, this is wacky, this stuff. But it's all going in there. It's all going into your subconscious mind, and you're taking all that in. And it was amazing, absolutely amazing. The two people I probably resonated with most at that point, who I've mentioned, is Tony Robbins and Wayne Dyer. Just amazing, and I use them for different things. I think Wayne Dyer is probably more spiritual.
Yeah.
And I would use to tap into that side of me more, where Tony Robbins is more of a boot you up the backside and get you motivated and give you purpose and direction and meaning. I
think he's a good start off when you're not into all this, because some of it can seem a bit extreme. Like if you start off with the Abraham Hicks, that's mental. And it's so funny because that was one of the first ones I listened to.
Yeah, wow. You just reminded me of a friend, Stephen, there. And Stephen, I don't mean any offence if you're watching this, just because Stephen and I were looking at starting a men's group and over in Wishaw. Stephen's amazing. He's such a beautiful human being, and I was going to do the mindset side of things and the talk. It's actually going to be quite natural, and just whatever came up with people came up. But Stephen had this course, I don't know whether a course or a program he wanted to run people through, and he was going to take people through their chakras basically, and and how you can clear each chakra and do the work in each one and what each one means energetically. So he was going to start this thing off with your root chakra, basically talking about your sex centre to men of Wishaw. Stephen, hold the bus. We can't start things like that with these guys coming along looking for a bit of help and guidance from Wishaw. and start talking about your willy. You can't do that, mate. I know that's not your root chakra, but you can't. That's what they're going to take from that. It would be completely alienating for them, I think. But Stephen's intentions are always so pure,
and he's right with what he's saying. It's just that
absolutely.
Sometimes you need to meet people where they are.
Absolutely.
And like dilute things down a wee bit, because if you go in too much too soon, it's just going to go over your head.
Aye.
Like I think about the first book I read was The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, and I've read that again about 6 or 7 times, and every time I read it I get something different. And when I think about the first time I read it and when I look at it now, I think I would not have understood a thing I was reading.
Well, I was the same, funnily enough, that exact same book. I read it.
Oh, you're so nice.
Do you like macaroni cheese? I love macaroni cheese. I remember reading that for the first time and I was like, what a pile of pish. I just couldn't, because that's where I was at that point. My comprehension of that stuff was just not there.
Yeah.
Now I've read it years later and I'm going, this is amazing. And you look at Eckhart Tolle and he's just incredible. Zig Ziglar is another guy that I love. He was one of Tony Robbins' mentors and Jim Rohn, people like that. Zig Ziglar from Texas had this Texas drawl. I couldn't listen to him. His accent was so off-putting for me. And then years later, I've come back to it. I'll still sit and listen to Zig Ziglar sometimes. He'll pop up and I love him now.
I don't know who he is. He sounds like a rock star.
No, he's not. Maybe he's a rock star of the self-help world, perhaps. But he's amazing. Where was I with my journey there? I don't know. This is what I do as well. I go off on all sorts of tangents.
I know.
Music's like so important. As you know, the stuff that we're doing now is music so important to the workshops that I do. I was fortunate enough to do a talk alongside David Hamilton, and music was a big part of my talk there as well. There's another guy, amazing guy. I've made this my episode about everybody else other than me, haven't I?
That's because you do that.
I know.
You're so kind and you're always thinking about other people.
My friend Colin said that as well. So after we did that event at the Alona, he said, you've just made that about everybody else other than you. He said, what did you do at that event? So, and it was a great day.
But then that means that, like you were saying that earlier on, you used to make everything about you and then you've went the opposite way. So it's just getting that balance, appreciating you as well and others. And
I think, like, although I say I made everything about myself, I wasn't consciously doing that.
No.
It was so subconscious. My behaviour, the way that I was just blind steaming drunk every single weekend, still living with my parents for part of that time. Try to deep fry a Mars bar at 2 o'clock in the morning, coming home, just stupid stuff like that. No consideration for them whatsoever. The states I was coming in, I don't know, relationships I was in, I wasn't, I was a bad person, just pretty inconsiderate.
Made it about you.
Aye.
But I think people do that and they don't realise. It's when you start to have a look. Like, remember I was saying about the list, when I made a list about everything I wanted in someone, it's like, who do you need to be? And you need to start looking at your own behaviour and how you're impacting others. And often we can just go through life being like, they're this, they're that, it's their fault I'm feeling like this. But like, we don't look in. Well, a lot of people don't look in at one point and ever. But then when you start to do all this kind of work on yourself, you do start to look at your own behaviour and realise that sometimes it's maybe you creating dramas or attracting things in. And
it never stops. So that journey never ever stops. So you might catch yourself sometimes. So I went to Tony, when was that? I went to Tony Robbins 2 years ago with Chris.
23. Yeah.
And even after that, I came out and I look at relationships that were completely wrong. But I looked at a particular one and thought, what part did I play there in that? And I sent the person a thank you for what they'd done for me in my life. And that wasn't to get kudos or anything like that. That was just from the heart.
Reflecting.
Yeah, absolutely. And although I say, like, I'd met Lawrence and became a DJ and that was a pivotal point in my life changing, again, from that point, I was still pretty miserable during periods of that. And the reason being for that is I wasn't living it every single day of my life. We said in the last episode, like Arnold Schwarzenegger doesn't go to the gym one time and he wins Mr. Universe. It's every single day of his life he was there grinding, just putting the work in. Grinding's the wrong word for doing the spiritual and mental work on yourself, because it makes it sound more difficult than it should be. Things as simple as going out a walk in nature and connecting. You've really helped me with that. You love being outside. I liked being outside before. I loved being outside, but nobody likes being outside as much as you do. So things like that, you've really helped ground me as a person and get outside and make sure I'm doing things like that. Eating the right stuff, drinking enough water, doing exercise, all these wee things, reading 10 pages of a book that's going to inspire you. I think the world just now is, it's easy to absorb all the negativity. It's so, because we're surrounded by it, it's easy to get onto a WhatsApp group chat and start share a link that some crazy dodgy person's up to something and start bitching and gossiping about that person. How often do you go into a WhatsApp group chat and somebody's shared a wee cat's been saved in Idaho or something like that? Do you know what I mean? Like good news. I don't know. But something like that, it's people sharing good news. I think that's what this podcast is all about. There's some sadness and there's heaviness in it, but ultimately it's good stories. It's feel-good stories because we're through the other end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, you go. Oh, I thought you were going to say something. I'm not used to this. This just feels uncomfortable. So again, there still were challenging times throughout those few years, from again about the age 24, 25 going forward. I suppose all that climaxed, my marriage broke up, and at the same time that was going on, in between that I had another daughter as well. So I've got 2 daughters who are just, at that time were just my entire world. And you saw that, as you say, that's partly what attracted you to me, is just my love for my children. And
that comes across like they're just your Achilles heel, like you just would do anything for them, and just such an amazing dad.
They are. I mean, my 4 kids are my Achilles heel. As are you, I suppose. Like people can say and do what they want to me, and I suppose I've built that resilience over the years. But doing something that's going to hurt my kids and my family, no, that's the line that's crossed there. So that I mean, my marriage breaking down, and then at that point in time, exactly the same year, my dad get diagnosed with motor neurons disease. And that was hard. That was really hard. And at that point, I began to spiral. And that's where I reflect now, the person that I am today, I reflect back on. I went back into that selfish mode there, partly during that. I lost my driving license during that point as well. And that was a real sore point for me, because my dad loved driving. He restored cars as a hobby. He was a driving instructor, and then he was a driving examiner. He loved cars. He didn't ever like football. He would sit and watch Formula 1 and stock car racing and all this kind of stuff. So for me to lose a driving license, I remember him just sitting talking to me about it. And by this point, he was losing the power of speech. He was using his eye gaze machine to talk, and just said, "Stephen, I don't care what's happened. Please just tell me what's happened and we can sort it." And I thought, even at that stage in his life where he's been faced with that diagnosis, he was still so caring and still wanted to look out for me. And that, at that point, was too overwhelming for me. I tried to take my own life that year. I won't say the date, and I won't say how I tried to do it and stuff like that. And again, I look at it now and I won't attach that word selfish to it. won't attach that, because it's the amount of pain that was in. There was so much going on. It was those couple of things, and there was a whole other host of things, and I'd hit the bottle again at that point to try and cope and get through that stuff. I had my two daughters kind of half the time, and whilst they weren't there, I was eating Crave cereal and drinking. Crave's tremendous, by the way, but the drinking to get through things, and it got to a point where I just couldn't deal with the pain anymore. Because of the amount of pain that was causing other people round about me, because I was being so selfish. And again, the person that got me through that was Lawrence again, who I turned to and just put an arm around me and dragged me through that. I remember the day so vividly that I tried to leave the world. Just instant regret after it. And I get images of the two girls and thought, what kind of dad am I doing this? And I got that exact same image at my dad's funeral, where it was packed, it was rammed. You would say it was like a young person's funeral. Mm-hmm. It was standing room only. It was absolutely rammed. Now, we had arrived at the funeral, and you go through a little back door and stuff. I hadn't looked up. I just didn't look up. I had my eyes fixed to the floor. They came, and we were sitting kind of down the front pew, and they came up and got us to come and get the coffin. And that was a story there as well. I don't mind telling this story. There's some things I'm trying to avoid saying because they're personal, and involve other people, but they'd taken us round. We'd chosen who was going to carry my dad for that final journey for him. The people that were there for him the most in that journey, from him being diagnosed to him passing away. And then one of my uncles, his eldest brother, had come up. He hadn't been chosen, and come up and said, no place for big brother. And my uncle Paddy, who was there from day one for my dad, stepped down and said, you take my place. To me, that showed the humility of that man to do that. Mm-hmm. In that situation, probably one of the most important situations I had in life, to show that level of strength and humility to do that. That was horrific for my mum as well. You know, as we're walking down, and he took the front space, one of the front spaces, as we walked down the aisle. I don't know what you call it, an aisle at a funeral. I don't know what you call it. You know what I mean? Walking down, my mum turned round and expecting to see one of her three sons, and perhaps my Uncle Paddy there, and turned round to see this other uncle there. And that was heartbreaking for her, because she had picked the people that were there for my dad most. I hadn't looked at this point. I'm just focused on getting down there and, getting my dad in place and stuff like that. And then I sat back down in the front. I said a few words at my dad's funeral, and then I went up to talk. It was that point to do that, and I looked up. That was the first point I'd looked up at the funeral, and it was rammed. As I said, it was absolutely rammed, and the word that I got at that point was legacy.
You're right.
Yeah, I'm okay. Sorry, I don't know what that noise that was I made, but it was just legacy. Mm-hmm. The amount of respect and love in that room for that man, and that is the point my life changed. For years, I'd done all these courses, NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, and it was all great, but I wasn't living it. And at that point, I just looked up and thought, that man left that legacy for me. Mm-hmm. You know, make no mistake about it, that man was my hero. I say, even when he was going through his most difficult times, he put family first. When he got his diagnosis, I remember the day as clear as day. It's the first time I'd saw my dad cry. You know, I'd been to multiple funerals with him. He was that source of strength. But that's the first time I'd seen him cry, because he was more worried about my mum than he was himself. And he went about taking care of business. So when he passed away, she didn't need to worry, and all the dominoes were in line for her. And at that point, I remember just sitting in the garden with him, chatting with him, and he said, just do me one favour, just look after your mum for me.
And you have. And that's why you're the way you are, because you've had that good role model.
But to that point, I said the word legacy, and I just questioned myself at that point, what legacy am I leaving for my kids? Because it's not one that I'm proud of, and not one they should be proud of. And that's when things changed for me. That's when I started to apply things, and all the courses I'd done, I started to apply that and live that every single day of my life. And that passion I had when I was a teenager, when I was 19 years old, to go out and help people, that sparked again. I just wanted to go out and help people. People that had perhaps been on a similar path to me, plodding along, a bit lost. They didn't have clarity and direction in life, and they just needed that. They needed a bit of guidance. That completely fired back up in me.
It's much harder for guys as well, because I spoke about having that big group of girls, but I think women, it's easier for us to talk to each other. And I know you had Chris Matthews that was really there for you during that time, but I think for guys going through that, they find it hard to go and speak to another guy or just to open up.
Well, Chris, I'm glad you mentioned Chris, because I wanted to mention Chris. He, after I tried to take my own life, he's the guy that showed up for me as well. As simple as showing up with a bag of messages for me. He showed up at my door with some bread and bacon for me. And Chris has just got the biggest heart in the world. And you know Chris now. He's
Your best man.
He's so kind. He's so funny. He's got the same kind of sense of humour as me. He shares dad jokes all the time.
Slated me during the speech.
He's just got the biggest heart in the world. And sometimes, you see, unless you know Chris, sometimes you don't get close enough to know that. But he is absolutely just one of the life's angels, Chris. Yes. So that was the change for me, and where things really began to shift. Still saw Lawrence at that point. I mentioned Stuart. Well, I didn't meet Stuart until I met you. So Stuart's another coach. And I think this is important, mentioning life coaches. There's no shameless plug for life coaches, because I am one now. It's even now, when I am in the best place I've ever been in life, I'm genuinely happy every single day. Some people question my optimism for life. I still see a coach.
Mm-hmm. It's not just about going to sort healing out, it's about moving forward,
Exactly.
you said.
Exactly. How can I, and it might be going to see Stuart, asking questions about my business. Mm-hmm. And Stuart and Lawrence are two completely different people. Stuart is, he's an ex-cop, so he's very black and white about things at times. And I mean that in a good way. Rational is the word I'm looking for. He's very rational in the way that he approaches things, and will call me out on my own bullshit with things. I've had an idea. So do you.
And so will Lawrence.
I know Lawrence does, but
Lawrence
again,
is
in his own unique way.
Now.
Yeah, Lawrence is definitely he's like a father-like figure to me now. He is, in his guidance he's given me through life. He's an amazing guy. And that, from that point, that's when things started to change. And you said in the last episode, you need to be the person, to get the person that you want to attract into life. If you're trying to attract better into your life, you need to be better. Yeah. So that's when I met you. I get this random friend request coming out of nowhere. But again, I spoke to Chris Ferry about you before. So who's this? She's all right. And
thought I was Miss Holy.
Yes. And then I saw you. I was out with on a work night out, and you happened to be out on a date at that point. I said to...
It's not going in.
I mean, it didn't even buy you pizza. I said to Chris, she's already taken. So that... But then it was just a few months after that we met each other. Mm-hmm. And we've never stopped talking since. Yeah. And way back, at the beginning of that relationship was this vision that we're living right now.
I know.
This podcast, this retreat that we're doing together, the workshops that we do together, that was all there. In that journey we have been through, again, as we said in the last episode, we have been through so much together. I mentioned death in the last one. Obviously, I've mentioned some. We lost my grandpa during COVID. He was my comedy hero. So it was, my dad was my hero. He was my comedy hero. I remember as a young boy, standing in, it was an old department store in Motherwell. It's no longer there. You know where Bombshell is?
Yeah.
It was the Co-op department store, and my grandpa used to pretend to be a mannequin and scare the shit out of people.
Is that what you got it?
I just constantly this kind of scampishness and just mischief about him, but not in a kind of a bad way at all. I was just always light-hearted, so I got that from my grandpa. It just always made me laugh. Nobody's ever made me laugh like my grandpa.
What about me?
Nobody's ever made me laugh like my grandpa. So during that, there was that we went through, and there was other stuff that we won't go into because, again, it involves other people that we want to protect. During that time we went through, and it was some of the hardest stuff to go through. But you're far better armed to go through those things. I wouldn't have got through that stuff without you. Absolutely not. There's no way I would have got through that stuff. So even with all that work you do on a daily basis, or I do on a daily basis, you're still going to get these things that come along and knock you off your feet.
Absolutely.
And challenge you. And
you don't do all the things every day. I think that's something that I've learned, because when you go to Tony Robbins and he's like, you're going to feel like this every day and have your morning routine, but when you have got 4 Waynes and 2 Dougs, you've not got time to get up every day and do all these things religiously, and when you put other people first all the time. But when you learn them, and then like sometimes you do like a phase of keeping up with all the stuff, the ice baths and things, but then sometimes something knocks you off your feet and you need to just stop for a minute and say, right, what do I need to do right now? Like, go back to this kind of list of strategies you've got. Is it reading? Is it talking to someone? Is it getting out in nature? Is it doing a nice bath? Is it just having a cry or something? Like, you're not going to do them all the time, but they're always there so that when something big does happen, you can kind of reset a bit.
Absolutely. You've got a place to fall back on.
Yeah. Something you've not spoke about is what you used, one of your best strategies to get you through, like, because now we were talking about sometimes you need to feel it, and that's something that you always talk about. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, and you know this as well because you saw that in me. I made busy work all the time.
Oh yeah.
Constantly distracted myself from what was going on in my head. And the key for me was not so much paying attention to what was going on in my head, but paying attention to where that sat in my body and how that felt in my body.
Yeah.
And I started to tap into that, notice these things, and how can I move that through my body. Again, music, I use music a lot and that type of stuff to help process thoughts and feelings, and process them through and out. Most importantly, you need to stop and feel. So many of us, again, especially men, especially in the west of Scotland, you're brought up with this almost male bravado approach to life where you don't cry, you don't feel, you just crack on and get on with things.
Scared to get slagged.
Absolutely. So it's taking that time to stop and feel.
And I think like what you do with the music's so magical. Something that I do with the kids sometimes as well, but it's like not avoiding the pain and using these kind of slower, sadder songs to feel that and then bring yourself through.
So I subconsciously did that back in the day, and the 2 songs that I used to listen to was Evanescence, My Immortal.
Oh, that's a great song.
I mean, nobody's going to smile listening to that. It is so sad. The opening lyrics, I'm so tired of being here. And when I was feeling suicidal, that's the kind of stuff I was listening to. And the other one is Johnny Cash, Hurt. again, you even look at the video for that. That's Johnny Cash's last message to the world. You can clearly see that as a man in the way out.
So much pain.
Absolutely, it's so powerful. The song, the 9 Inch Nails song that he covered, but there's obviously he chose it for a reason to cover that and for that to be his final message. So those are the songs that I listened to a lot. So I was probably subconsciously doing that, sitting, listening and processing that stuff. I didn't realise that at that point. I was probably using it as a place to suppress and to get stuck in those feelings because I didn't know how to then get out of that and move into a kind of more motivated state, I suppose.
So how would you do that now?
So again, if we're talking specifically about music, there's different protocols for the type of music you're listening to. So like I've just mentioned there, so you're listening to music which is slower in tempo, between 60 and 80 beats per minute. You're listening to music with lyrics so the mirror neurons in your body build empathy with that song, and the songwriter, most importantly, it builds a narrative in your mind around about that song. Evanescence, for example, I'm so tired of being here, suppressed by all these childish fears. I would sit and listen to that now going, what was she going through when she was writing that, and build up this narrative and complete picture in your mind. This is why I don't like it when musicians will tell you this is what this song means. Oh, well, in saying that, in some cases it adds more. Like the song Drops of Jupiter by Train, that was a song, I didn't know what that was about. I just loved that song. And then the lead singer, it's a song about his mum passing away. She had cancer and she passed away, and he's talking to the universe, her and the stars. That was his message to his mum that passed away. So sometimes that knowing adds a bit more narrative. But the key is building that empathy through the mirror neurons in your body, and that allows you then to build that own empathy and compassion within yourself to go through whatever you're going through and process it through. The key then is coming through that. So you're listening to that for about 9 minutes, and then you're coming through that with changing to something like 140 beats per minute and above the music. Again, I mentioned this in the talk I did at the Alona. The interesting thing, listening to music that motivates and gets you moving into more motivated states, is it doesn't matter what the lyrics are. It can be complete and utter nonsense. It doesn't matter. Like Spice Girls, wannabe, I want a zigga zigga zagga.
That's really meaningful to me.
Like what does that actually mean? But you get people rushing to dance floors to do that. You know, partly it's because of the tempo of the music, but partly because it's accessing memories. So it's nostalgia for people. I'll take you way back to the 90s and what you were doing then and things like that. So it's using music like that, but it's also moving your body. So it's getting up and moving, and you can do it alone if you want. You do it with people if you want, but the key is getting up, moving and feeling the music, feeling that beat of the music.
Yeah.
Fascinating thing that I'm studying just now is breathwork. This is incredible. I can't wait to use this with people. The experience I had on Sunday last week. Now, I had a real hard time. That's 7 years since my dad passed away this month. I had a real hard time remembering him beyond the disease. So what that stripped, and we grieved over, it was 18 months between diagnosis and him passing away. I couldn't remember him past that. I had a block there. The breathwork session I did on Sunday there took me back to when I was 8 years old, watching Home Alone in my mum and dad's living room. I remember the whole journey around, going down to Videodrome in Bells Hill, renting the cassette tape. Again, the kids would be like, what's a cassette tape?
Having to rewind it back.
Aye, rewind that back, otherwise you get fined in the video shop. Remembering that full journey and sitting watching that with him, and with tears streaming down his face, laughing at that. Now I remember watching it. I still watch Home Alone now. I like Home Alone, but it's not that funny.
I like people falling, so it's
but the amount he laughed at it, I just remember watching that point going, that was incredible. And that's one of my last memories with him as well, sitting watching Deadpool. We watched all the Police Academy movies. Aeroplane, things like that, and just him just roaring about laughing, even when he was near the end, just the laugh he had, that infectious laugh, it just was incredible. So that breathwork session took me back to that. And now I'm having all these little things pop up, wee memories that were completely blocked because that energy, that block has been shifted. So I'm having all these little things coming back. First 2 or 3 days, it was heavy feeling. And I think people need to realise that as you move these blocks in life, things like shit's going to come up.
Yeah.
And it's knowing how to deal with that stuff.
Sometimes it's not the right time for people because they're scared to address it, but then something happens and you want to. So it's knowing where to turn to for these things.
Aye.
The breathwork's amazing as well because you ended up doing that because we went to some breathwork things and there's nothing in this area that's really comparing to the ones that we went to. I went to one first and I was like, you need to go to this. We've done everything under the sun, so can compare it to a lot of different things. But the first one, and I went to and it was just the breathwork session, and I had this feeling, this knot in my chest, anxiety, and I didn't know what was causing it for ages, for like a couple of months, and it just wouldn't shift. And then went to that breathwork session and it was just away. But breathing's so important. That's something that I had learned on my yoga course, is how our breath controls like so much of your nervous system, how it's sending messages to the brain. So I'm so excited for you to do this course. So
it's incredible.
I could be the student.
It's honestly incredible. Out of all the courses I've done throughout my life, this is it. I
love that it's related to all the trauma stuff as well, because you know that's just like my area of interest, like total geek reading Gabor Mate every night. So I love that it's all trauma informed, because I remember when you were saying that you were getting into coaching and I was like, please make sure you're trauma informed, because from my work with the ACEs stuff, I know other life coaches who haven't been, and I just think sometimes they're causing more of your trauma and don't realise when they're dealing with the big things. So I think that's going to be so special that that's something you're going to be specialising in as well.
Absolutely. And for me, it's so important that I am doing the work myself still.
Yeah.
So going out and helping other people, if you're not in a place to be helping other people and you're projecting all your shite onto them, then you're going to cause so much damage to people. Absolutely. So much damage. So I'm so grateful I'm in a place. And the question that I always come back to and that encourage anybody to ask themselves is, who do I want to be? Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean you say the type of house you want. It doesn't mean you say material possessions. None of that. Like at your core, authentically, who do you want to be as a person? How do you want to show up in the world for your kids, for your parents, for your friends, for your extended family? Who do you want to be? And am I truly living that? Am I being that person? That's what all these moments in life have led me to come back to, is ask myself that question. Again, I mentioned that word legacy. What legacy am I leaving? I think I'm leaving a far more powerful legacy now for my children, and I'm actually in a place for once that I'm proud of who I am and what I'm doing, because I ask myself that every single day. That doesn't mean to say I get it right every single day in my life. There's times I screw up still, but then it's asking myself authentically, am I living that dream, that image of who I am, how I'm showing up in this world? I think everybody should ask themselves that question.
Absolutely. And I think you're doing a very good job.
I'll do it. Yeah. Just under an hour.
Well, thank you very much. That was amazing to hear your story, and I had to fight back the tears a lot because, I think you've done so much. You've done really well, and your dad would be so proud of you.
Thank you. Don't try and get me greeting again. No, I've enjoyed it. It's perhaps perverse to say I've enjoyed it, but yeah.
It's therapeutic.
Aye, it's been nice to sit and tell my story. I have to say as well, so there's a couple of things I didn't mention there in my previous podcast journey. Some of the people that I met, I want to mention as well. Doddy Weir, I had the absolute privilege of meeting Doddy Weir. There's another guy, talk about legacy. He's a guy that get faced with diagnosis and he raised millions of pounds. He took that and turned it into a positive, like Pitbull. David Hamilton, what a lovely, amazing, truly one of the kindest guys I've ever met.
I know.
Just
Feel
wanted to
lucky
mention
call
those.
my friend.
So lucky to call my friend. I just wanted to mention those people. June Moore as well. Wee June. She's a lovely person as well.
I'm going to do a course with her next week. Cannot wait.
So check out David Hamilton. I'll punt somebody else. But we've got a retreat. We've got a retreat as well, 11th of January. Shameless plug.
But it's going to be going back through, like, looking at that inner child, healing anything you need to, and becoming at a place where you're like, right, I'm ready to face 2025.
Absolutely, and face it authentically. Like, we're not setting resolutions, we're setting intentions.
And there's going to be lots of movement and music.
Aye.
Well, thank you.
Cheers.
This has been Stephen's story. Well done.